Indeed, we are the guardians of America, armed and free, both in uniform and not, as I don't know about whether or not Dr. Edeen has ever been in uniform. I guess that's one of the questions I'll ask him once I bring him up. But Dr. John Edeen, medical doctor, is a pediatric orthopedic surgeon in private practice in San Antonio, Texas. God bless Texas for the past 19 years. He is the membership director for Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. He's been a speaker at the Gun Rights Policy Conference for the past 3 years, yay, and some of his writings include The Unthinkable, An Active Shooter in a Hospital, and Crosshairs, Are Our Hospitals Targets for Terrorist Attacks? These articles and others can be found on DRGO.us. Again, DRGO.us. Dr. Edeen, it is a joy and a pleasure to welcome you to the telephones and microphones of America Armed and Free.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And to answer your question, yes, I have worn the uniform. I was a Navy doctor.
Huh.
I did my orthopedic training at Oakland Naval Hospital when it still existed. It no longer exists. I served as a medical officer aboard the USS Peleliu for 2 years, which the Peleliu is an amphibious assault ship
carrying
helicopter Marines around the Western Pacific. So, yes, I served.
All right, so I will amend
I also went to Somalia, too, for that matter.
I will amend my statement. It is a joy, a pleasure, and an honor to have with us Dr. John Edeen. Welcome. And thank you for your service to the country. And a helicopter carrier, right?
Right. We had Harrier jets as well as and also landing craft. So we had the LCACs and the LCUs, which were the LCACs were the hovercraft, and the LCUs were the big, landing craft with the gate, the ramp that goes down in the front and all that kind of fun stuff.
The D-Day,
2 years.
The D-Day looking thing.
Exactly.
Did you ever get to ride along on one of those?
Say again?
Did you ever get to? Yeah, you have been on ship. Hearing loss. Did you ever get to ride along on one of those?
I did not. I did some trips on helicopters, but never did any landing craft stuff. They really didn't like me to leave the ship, frankly.
Well, no, you're in demand. You're a guy that's, a very necessary part of the shipboard crew, so in case your skills are needed. I want to talk about the topic, get off of all that, and get on the topic that we have you here about the context. First, let me set a context for the audience, if you will. The 1934 National Firearms Act governed short-barreled rifled, so-called sawed-off rifles and shotguns. It covered machine guns and it covered suppressors. Suppressors are known colloquially as silencers. They don't really silence the gun, but they do alter the report of a firearm, much as the muffler of a car alters the sound. In fact, it's the same exact technology patented originally by the same guy. And what it does is it does not outlaw machine guns, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, or suppressors. It makes them in a class of taxation where you have to buy a tax stamp for $200 on each individual one every time it's transferred. Now, the reason that was a prohibition in 1934 was you could buy a machine gun for $75 from Ace Hardware, but the tax was $200. No one in his right mind, or a shotgun, a farmer could buy a shotgun and saw the barrel off and make it a really good saddle gun. He could buy a greener shotgun for $5 new and $3.50 used, but the tax was $200 on it. So effectively, it had the effect of banning them. But over the years, as inflation has come along, the tax has never gone up. Therefore, and today machine guns are worth a heck of a lot of money because the number of them in civilian possession has been frozen as of 1986. So today the tax is paltry compared to the price of the gun. The same is true of a suppressor. Suppressors have a tendency, if they're for a major caliber, of being between $600 and $1,000, and the tax is $200. You say, if I'm going to have the suppressor, I'll have the tax stamp. Therefore, there are millions of suppressors in private hands. Currently, the Hearing Protection Act of 2017, which is H.R. 367, and its companion bill in the Senate, S59, are both current bills, and what they would do is take suppressors out of NFA and make them treated as ordinary firearms. It would not deregulate them. It would simply put them back in the class with or other normal, ordinary firearms as they really are. They're not really a firearm. They're just a tube with baffles in it is all it is, just like your muffler. But the point of the matter is that's what this current would do. Dr. Edeen, would you please tell us about the nature of hearing loss from loud noise and from explosive blast, especially as it relates to other noise impulses?
Sure. Well, when we talk about the loudness of a noise, we talk about the decibel level. or it's a logarithmic scale. So as you go up, it doubles. So
kind of like warp drive.
Right, exactly. So the 100 and 110, not 10 more. It's really like another. It's like 1,000. So it's a logarithmic scale. So what we look at is the cutoff is 140 decibels. So if you get exposed to a noise of 140 decibels, that will cause permanent, irreversible hearing loss. And a firearm, like a Glock pistol, for instance, is 171 decibels. So you shoot a 9mm Glock, it's 171 decibels. A rifle is probably in the 181 decibel range, like a 308. So what we're talking about is unprotected exposure to common firearms we know will cause permanent, irreversible hearing loss. So there's no doubt. What a suppressor does is it decreases that decibel level by anywhere from 20 to 30 decibels. But more importantly, what it does is it also tames the muzzle blast impulse. And that is 1,000 times stronger than what you're actually hearing. And so that's the advantage of a suppressor. Now you can talk about, well, why don't you put ear muffs and earplugs and all this stuff in? And yes, that does decrease some of the noise. However, it doesn't always tame the impulse completely. And the other thing is, it makes it more dangerous. For instance, in a teaching situation or a range situation, if the shooter cannot hear the instructions given by the range safety officer or the instructor, then that's a safety issue. Mm-hmm. So we find that the suppressor is actually the better choice if you're going to go with both. Or you can use a suppressor plus the electronic noise reducing earmuffs that will decrease the noise kind of mechanically, but then electronically, if it's a louder than the safe threshold, they actually shut the noise down completely. So it's a much safer way to go.
Is that what you hear called the P wave or the percussion wave? What you're talking about from the barrel of the gun? Is there any?
Exactly. In fact,
go ahead.
In fact, it's what you feel when you're at the range and a guy next to you is shooting a .357 Magnum or a .44 Magnum, and you're at the pistol range. You feel that slap in the face. That's the percussion wave. That's what we're talking about.
I actually, it actually feels to me, because I do spend a lot of time talking when I'm instructing. I too, like you, are an instructor, and we're both graduates of Masad Ayoub's classes, although you've gone much farther. You're far more advanced in his classes. You went to the Mag 80. I just took the old LFI 1. But and I spend a lot of time saying something to somebody, and when a gun goes off near me, I can actually almost feel it. It almost feels like your cheeks move out if your mouth is open. Is that what you're talking about? That wave?
Right. Yeah, it's literally a slap in the face, because there's a shock wave, a sound wave that is propagated from the firearm that hits you, and there's also something called bone conduction as well. You can get bone conductive hearing. In fact, that's the way a lot of kind of the early hearing aids worked, is that they were bone conduction. And so, yes, I mean, even though you're wearing stuff over your ears, your skeleton will actually transmit the sound waves as well.
Mm-hmm. So what the suppressor does is it slows down the gases coming out. There's two sounds we hear, boom and crack. Crack is a bullet breaking the sound barrier, and boom is thunder. It's high-speed air hitting low-speed air, or high-speed gas hitting low-speed air. So what the suppressor actually does is slow down the impulse of the thunder. And are you saying that by slowing down that impulse, that that's what lowers the percussion?
Yes, exactly right. Because again, it's that velocity of gas escaping from the muzzle of the firearm that causes that shock wave. If you put that same impulse of gas through a bunch of baffles, it slows it down, it decreases the energy. It's all lost inside that suppressor, so that when it does exit the muzzle of the suppressor, it's dampened by 20 to 30 decibels, which is like 1,000 times when you're looking at it.
See, it's much magnified for me because I shoot in a tunnel for instruction once a month. And I know for a fact I've had my hearing tested, and exactly in the frequency range of gunshots, I got a huge drop off in my hearing. And I mean, obviously, I wear both plugs and muffs, but by the same token, it still does not. I've still had. I used to be able to hear above 22,000 cycles. I could hear silent burglar alarms. I sure don't anymore. Of course, I'm 60, so that's some of it's natural, but I suspect a lot of it has to do with shooting in a tunnel with people. I don't let people shoot 357 or 44 mag in the tunnel.
Right, and if you look at rifles, you're shooting a 50 caliber rifle or a 338 Lapua or something like that. Even with a suppressor, you still need hearing protection because it only, so you're only getting into the 150 decibel range, which will still give you permanent hearing injury.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
loosen your fillings.
About that tinnitus, that ringing in your ears, and that's those nerve cells screaming in pain. Essentially, is what you're feeling.
That's that's graphic. All right, well, almost as graphic, but much more pleasant. We have some ads coming up on AM 1030 KVOI, Cortero, Tucson, the voice in the Perfection AutoWorks studios. If you have questions about hearing, or anything related to shooting with a medical expert who's also a very well-trained firearms instructor with Dr. John Edeen of Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. And welcome back to On America Armed and Free at 900 rounds a minute with Dr. John Edeen. And I love taking the anti's music and using it up against them. That's part of one of the philosophies. We call it tailpipe carburetorism here on America Armed and Free. Dr. Edeen, we're referring to the Hearing Protection Act, which would take silencers out of the NFA, National Firearms Act, and treat them as ordinary firearms. Frankly, I don't understand why a hollow tube with baffles in it has to be treated as anything other than a hollow tube with baffles. But if you treat it as an ordinary firearm, it would then become legal to sell between individuals, and that would stop a lot of the problem. Also, you could manufacture one on your very own, and there's nothing illegal about that either.
No, in fact, if you look at other noise situations, OSHA would be all over this if it were any other type of device. But since it's a firearm and it falls under the National Firearms Act, I mean, this was all a political Hollywood-induced law. It was because they decided they wanted to go after the gangsters in Chicago, and this is one of the ways they went after it. And of course, in Hollywood, when somebody shoots a suppressed weapon, it's a whisper. Well, that's not true. I mean, that's done in the Foley artist studio. That's not done on the scene. That's not what the real sound sounds like.
No, it's not.
So,
although I will say, outdoors,
it doesn't make sense.
Outdoors, and if you put liquid in your suppressor, it can get pretty quiet for a couple shots.
Right.
That is true. But indoors, there's still a P wave. It's a slower moving pressure wave, but there still is one. And if you're indoors, you probably still, almost assuredly, unless it's a 22, you probably still do need ear protection. You certainly need air protection. And
the supersonic crack of most rounds, too. I mean, as you said before, you get the noise of the thunder, but then you also get the crack of the projectile, breaking the sound barrier. And that can hurt your hearing, too. Right, unless you're shooting like CCI Stinger or high-velocity stuff out of a pistol-length barrel. A lot of 22s don't break the sound barrier, so you don't get that. Right. You don't get that. They're 800 feet per second or somewhere in that range. Maybe a little more, but at sea level, the speed of sound is approximately 1,110 feet per second, 760 miles an hour. So a lot of ammo doesn't get going faster than that, but I don't want to go down the technology rabbit hole on this. Are auditory injuries sustained by bystanders from firearm noise any different than injuries sustained by the shooter, him or herself? No, in fact, they're probably worse, and there's a reason for that. There's a little muscle inside the middle ear called the stapedius muscle, and it attaches into one of those little bones called the stapes. When you personally are firing a weapon, your brain understands that that's going to make a noise, and that little muscle actually tightens up and dampens the movement of those of those bones. Now, it doesn't completely mitigate the damage to your hearing, but it can protect to some degree. And, you get auditory exclusion. Part of that may be the stapedius muscle acting. Well, the person standing next to you does not anticipate that bang, and they get the full force blast. So they are probably actually at a little bit more risk than the shooter.
And you know who really gets that is the person walking up to the shooting range to bring their gear there while the range is hot. Well, I tell you what, I see people all the time doing that. Then they're fumbling in their bag to get their headphones on. And you see people that are fully exposed to that fairly often if you go to a range.
Yeah, and that's pretty painful. I mean, I've been there myself.
Yeah.
One of the places that I shoot, the rifle range is right behind, so people are shooting, 30 caliber or better rifles about, 70, 80 feet away.
Yeah, well, you really get it then.
If
Dr. Edeen.
Somebody opens the door.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yep. Hold on, we got a caller who wants to ask you a question. Al, you're live on America Armed and Free. You wanted to ask about shooting indoors, right?
Yes, sir. Well, I actually wanted to make a comment.
Go ahead.
With, these new muzzle brakes, they're particularly bad if you're at next to somebody rather than behind them. So that's another.
Explain for the audience, Al. Explain for the audience what a muzzle brake is, if you would, please.
A muzzle brake takes the hot gases that exit just before and mostly after the bullet passes the crown of the barrel, and those gases go out, and when they expand, they create a shock wave and noise, much like lightning creates thunder. So a muzzle brake is designed to take those gases, much like a jet reverser, a thrust reverser on a jet engine, and push it in the opposite direction, which helps tame some of the felt recoil to the rear. And so it helps balance the recoil so it's not all going against your shoulder. But what it does typically is blows those gases out to the side. And so if you're standing behind the person with a muzzle brake, the noise is nowhere near as bad as if you're standing to the side of the person, because you're getting hit by a much higher decibel sound wave from that. Does that make sense?
Yes. Dr. Edeen?
Yeah, in fact, those muzzle brakes increase the velocity of so like running it through a nozzle. Think of your typical garden hose
or fire hose,
or fire hose, and when you twist the nozzle, you get a faster stream. It goes further and faster. That's essentially what's happening. And again, that blast wave that you were describing is hitting the person next to you very hard. I remember taking a rifle class with a guy next to me with a muzzle brake on his 30 caliber rifle, and the thing would clear the carpet off. It would blow all the dust off the carpet every time the guy shot. There was so much gas coming off to the side, and believe me, it was very unpleasant to be shooting next to that guy. Again, you got the slap in the face.
The secret is just standing behind him. If you come onto the range, don't get to the side of somebody unless you got hearing protection. The other thing I wanted to mention is that I always keep a pistol by my bedstand at night, and shooting in an enclosed space without ear protection is very disorienting, particularly in the dark. So what I started doing is putting a set of electronic earmuffs next to my pistol, and if I hear something that I'm suspicious of, I take my pistol and my flashlight and I put on my electronic hearing protection and turn it all the way up, so I can hear noises that you can't hear with normal hearing. And I think that is it's an advantage if you're like going through your house at night when it's dark. You can hear things better than you normally would. So I think that would add to your ability to discern if there's a threat.
The only thing is, if the dog...
That's excellent advice.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Clearly, you're a reader of Masad Ayub. So, the only thing is, if the dog is panting heavily, you may think there's a hurricane.
Well, that's true, but situational awareness should take care of that.
Yes, sir, it should. All right, that's a great contribution, Al. All right, Dr. Edeen, I want to move on a little bit. You talk about, I don't want to just talk about the suppressor issue, but it is the main topic here. But briefly, you're very concerned with what may happen because hospitals are basically, except for police and some security guards, are basically disarmed victim zones of people who have negative intent towards the United States targeting hospitals because they are, in essence, soft targets. Could you address that, please?
Sure. I practice orthopedic surgery in San Antonio, Texas, and in a fairly large medical center. And the security at our hospital carries tasers. Now, to me, that's not security. That's somebody who can kind of sound the alarm, but they really can't do much of anything.
It's a placebo.
There may be an occasional armed security guard or police officer in the emergency department, which is the focus of a lot of criminal activity, when you get gangbangers coming in and stuff like that. So they have police officers there. But throughout the hospital, everybody's disarmed. And frankly, if something were to happen in a 10-story hospital, which is where I work, by the time either security or the police got there, the thing would be over. Most of these shooting episodes, the active shooter type thing, is over in 3 to 5 minutes. There was recently a terrorist attack in a hospital in Kabul, Afghanistan. It was a military hospital, and it was partially an inside job, and they were at it for 7 hours in that hospital. Yes. So the problem with hospitals, they're so big and they're so difficult to take, and they have long hallways, and so bad guys can set up at one end of a hallway, and it'd be very difficult for the good guys to get to them without taking a lot of casualties. And so, yes, hospitals are extremely soft targets. We talk about doing, casualty drills, and we have all this stuff, but they never do the hospitals or casualty drills. Think of what would have happened during the Boston Marathon if one of those guys showed up in the emergency room with a bomb vest and blew himself up as the casualties were arriving. This is, it's part of the playbook. This is what they've done in other places.
Right, it's not unheard of. That happens in Israel.
Prepared for that.
That happens in Israel with IEDs, a secondary IED that goes after the first responders.
Right. Well, they do that, and they were doing it. They were actually lighting off bomb vests in the emergency rooms early on, and so that's why in Israel ambulances get searched before they even make it to the hospital, which is something that at some point in time we're going to need to start thinking about that. Right now, you talk to the hospital administrators and they look at you like you're speaking Greek because it doesn't make any sense to them. It's going to take a terrorist attack against a hospital for all these administrators to recognize the issue. And I've been talking to my hospital administrators for 4 years now and have not made 1 millimeter of difference, other than they've probably improved their security a little bit, but it's still a problem. And in my eyes, having people on the scene who are armed and trained, something like, the FASTER program in Ohio, would be the best solution, because we can even advertise that fact, and that the terrorists are going to pick a different hospital if they know that the staff is armed. Not a soft target anymore.
Very briefly, what is the FASTER program for the audience?
Yeah, FASTER program is a program in Ohio. The Buckeye Firearms Foundation has put this together, and they teach school administrators and teachers and school employees both firearms marksmanship and also medical emergency response. So it's like faculty and administrator
safety training.
Yeah, safety training and emergency response.
Right.
Thank you.
No problem.
But the thing is, they actually train to a level higher than the Ohio State Police do as far as their firearms training. They have to qualify at a higher level than the police. And this is the kind of stuff that we need to start thinking about and being prepared.
Yep. All right. We're come to the bottom of the half hour, which is all the time that you've agreed to. If you can stay on, we'd be happy to hold you over one more segment. But if you have to leave, we completely understand.
No, I'm good. I can stay for another segment.
All right, then we'll have you stay for another segment, and we're going to go ahead and take the break right now on AM 1030, KVOI, Cortero, Tucson, the voice in the Perfection Auto Works studios. If you'd like to call in, Dr. John Edeen has gracefully agreed to stay on. And welcome back to this segment of America Armed and Free, where we have the joy, the pleasure, and the honor of having with us Dr. John Edeen. He's an emergency room doctor and a surgeon, and he's also a Navy veteran and has been to sea with the Navy. And how long did you serve in the Navy?
About 10 years.
Wow. Pretty neat. Well, thank you again for your service to the country. And
I'm a pediatric orthopedic surgeon, though. I'm not an emergency room doctor.
Excuse me. I know that. I have that on the bio in front of me, and I just spaced it because I have something up in front of me. Thank you for correcting me. Tell us about Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership.
Sure. Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership was founded by Dr. Timothy Wheeler, who is an ear, nose, and throat surgeon and one of the co-authors of the position paper that we talked about. But we're an advocacy and watchdog group confronting anti-gun bias in medicine, and we have a group of people who review, analyze, critique anti-gun publications. But we're not doctors only. We're actually healthcare professionals. So if you're, a nurse or a technician, they're certainly welcome to become members. We have testified in front of Congress. We have done amicus curiae briefs on several court cases, including the Docs versus Glocks Wollschlaeger case in Florida. The kind of the don't ask, don't tell kind of thing that we're trying to keep doctors from pushing their left-wing political agenda and using the doctor-patient relationship to push a political agenda, which we thought was
a boundary violation.
It's a boundary violation. And unfortunately, the Ninth Circuit sided with the opposition, and they didn't even cite the amicus curiae brief that we put in there. We actually had Mr. Greenlee do a nice brief for us. And
what was the Ninth Circuit doing involved in a Florida case?
I'm sorry, the 11th Circuit.
I'm sorry.
It was the 11th Circuit in Florida.
All right. No problem.
You're right. You got me.
No.
Yeah, but it's the 11th Circuit. But in any event, it's a circuit court, so the next stop is actually Supreme Court.
You think that'll go to the Supreme Court?
I
know you're a doctor, not a lawyer, but
we got to get it turned over because, frankly, I thought that the opinion that they wrote completely ignored the arguments on our side. And so it looked like it was kind of a biased finding.
Court bias against the right to keep and bear arms? Oh, please say that. Sir.
It's happened before, once or twice, maybe.
Yeah. Presser versus Illinois, and heck, if you want to look at it that way, even the Dred Scott decision was had a firearms component to it, and that they said it was aghast that a person who was black would be allowed to own a gun if they were a citizen. Ooh, can't have that, can we?
Well, of course, all gun control laws are based off of that. That's just the racism of gun control.
Right. Yeah.
And they don't want to talk to you about that, but that's the truth. It's
racist. The Racist Roots of Gun Control is a book that you can get from jpfo.org, a related organization because it is also under the umbrella of the Second Amendment Foundation, which DRGO is. But DRGO was founded by Dr. Tim Wheeler, and it's a nonprofit, but how is it? Can people, other than medical people, join as associate members?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not expensive. It's $35 and it's tax deductible. And all you need to do is go to drgo.us, and there's a tab there that you click on that says join, and then you just fill out the form and send it in, and we're happy to have people participate in any way that they want to participate or not participate, for that matter. A lot of people want to be anonymous. We have writers for our organization. We put out blog posts on Tuesdays and Thursdays every week. One of our writers is a pediatrician who writes under a pseudonym because she cannot afford to be outed by her organization because they'll go after her. She's a pediatrician. American Academy of Pediatrics is extremely anti-gun biased, as is the AMA and even, unfortunately, the American College of Surgeons to some degree.
AARP is not that it's a medical organization, but AARP is terribly biased against people's right to keep and bear arms, which is why AMAC is a much better alternative. There's also
I'm a member.
There's also the American Association of Physicians and Surgeons, which is actually based in Tucson, I believe.
I know about that organization from one of our members. We actually had that conversation.
Yeah, Dr. Lee.
We'll have to look at that.
Dr. Lee Vliet is a past president, and the current president is Dr. Jane Orient, who's famous for Doctors for Disaster Preparedness. and has been an internist here in Tucson for, I think, on 30 years. So, and she's a friend of mine, and also has been a guest on this program many times. Is there any one thing that people? This is an activist-style program, Dr. Edeen. Is there anything people can do to forward the impetus of the right of enforcing the right to keep and bear arms? Is there something, in your view, people can do to combat sort of the attacks against our liberties?
Well, the first thing is your representatives should know who you are. If you're not calling them and talking, at least their staffers need to know who you are. And if you can provide an information source for them so that they can look at you as a resource rather than an annoyance, that's also a good thing. You know, I've met with my state senator who happens to be a physician as well, and we've talked about, you know, some of the issues in Texas as far as, you know, firearms and gun-free zones and things like that. And, you know, she's a proponent of getting rid of gun-free zones, but unfortunately, in the state of Texas, we have a fair number of rhinos that are in positions of power, you know, including the Speaker of the House.
We have that same problem here in Arizona. Several key pieces of legislation are the problem is not the Democrats. The problem is the Republicans. And when they go all squishy, or frankly, they have electile dysfunction when it comes to the right to keep and bear arms, and they just cannot summon their courage screw their courage to the sticking place when it comes to voting for pro-RKBA things. And that includes the governor, who simply avoids having to do a veto by making sure that bills get stuck in committee that should come up, especially, for instance, the compact between states that would agree between states not to enforce any law that isn't required by federal law, and therefore, if you had a state initiative like happened in Washington State with I-594 about background check, it would nullify it. And our governor has experienced a genuine lack of testicular fortitude when it comes to bringing the bill to his desk.
Yep. Well, a similar thing happened here in Texas with our constitutional carry bill. That the chairman of the committee had a second bill which was not as good, and he was able to get that voted on and pushed through at the very last minute, but not enough time to get it to the floor to get it to vote. And the good constitutional carry bill never even got a vote in the committee.
Right.
And so we're seeing that sometimes, look at what happened in Florida, the same kind of thing. You know, you have one committee member who flip-flops, and all of a sudden your bills are stalled and nothing happens during that session. And in Texas, we only have 5 months out of every other year where bills can be passed.
Well,
so the next time we can get a bill through is going to be in 2019.
According to Will Rogers, that makes you more safe.
I think that you're probably right. They can do less damage, but when we're trying to undo the damage that's been done, then we're still dealing with that issue, and that's still a problem.
Well, I guess everything has a silver lining and a dark cloud, so to go along with it. You know, Dr. Edeen, if there was any one thing that you could tell people that they could do to help, not only with get rid of disarmed victim zones, but if there was any one action that this audience could commit to, what might that be in terms of the right to keep and bear arms, the freedom for the right to keep and bear arms, in your view?
Well, I think first of all, you need to register and you need to vote, and you need to get involved at the local level, because most of the stuff that happens is in the local and state level. So that, as I said, your politicians need to know who you are, and maybe get involved with whatever political party you decide you want to be involved with, and you need to have a voice. A very good friend of mine, Rachel Malone, here in Texas, lives in Austin. She's always at the State House. She's always doing that stuff. Frankly, if I were closer, I would probably be standing next to her if I had an afternoon off or something after doing surgery. The problem is it's a 2-hour drive for me to get there. So by the time I get there, they're already gone and done. Mm-hmm. But, Rachel does fantastic work, and she's a super-duper person, and she's really on the ball and really keeps everybody else informed as well. And so if you belong to your local organization, I think that's also something that you can do.
Rachel also plays a mean violin.
She's an awesome musician.
Yeah.
She's just a sweetheart of a person and a pretty darn good shot.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you why. There's a huge crossover between musical and mechanical ability and fine motor coordination when it comes to bowing, which is a very, very physically articulate skill. The same skill set is employed in aligning the sights and maintaining control over the firearm. I would make that musicians would be better shots than most.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Charlie Cook, right?
I don't know Charlie Cook.
Charlie Cook is riding shotgun with Charlie, and he also does the gun grams. So he plays the trumpet and shoots a pistol.
Ah, okay.
They're hilarious.
I
would think look at him.
I would think a slide trombone attached Glock might be kind of an effective tool.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, it could be. Who knows? I'm actually working with Rachel off the air on composing a number of songs related to history and the right to keep and bear arms. And I do the words, she does the music, and I've got to get going on that project. So far, we're still at top dead zero, but I need to. You've reminded me very nicely about it. Okay, one last time on Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, if you would give us the
Sure. Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership is at DRGO.us. We're also Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership on Facebook. The position paper on getting rid of getting the suppressors off the National Firearms Act is actually on our website. You can download it, and then you can read it, and then you can send it to your U.S. representative and your U.S. senator and say, hey, we want this thing passed. Here's the intellectual ammunition you need.
Okay. It's all the time
Don't disappoint us.
It's all the time we've got. Thank you. Appreciate it, Dr. John Edeen.